and welcome to the Gay Liberation Network here on Chicago Access Network TV. I'm your host, Andy Thayer, and with me today is Quentin Washington and Elane Jacobs, both proud CPS teachers with the Chicago Teachers Union, and they're going to be telling us about some of the issues here in the prospective strike, because everything we've heard from the Chicago Tribune, from the Chicago Sun-Times, and from the supposedly liberal Chicago Tonight program is over and over again, wages, wages, wages. And that's it. But you talk to teachers, rank and file teachers like Quentin and Elane, you're not going to be hearing that, because they're going to be telling you things about the conditions in the schools that they face.
Yes.
You guys didn't go into this profession to get rich, right?
Oh, of course not.
Oh, okay.
No.
You did. You made the wrong choice. But
Yeah.
so whichever of you wants to start, tell us about the issues as you see them in the possible strike, and what you want to improve in the schools.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Elane.
Well, I want more fun. So I come to it as a science teacher, ESL, and a newly special ed teacher. So I want more funding for special ed resources. I want arts and music and library. Many of my schools I've taught in the south side or the west side do not have art classes, do not have libraries, or if it's art instead of music. And my students deserve all of it. And I want lots more counselors in the school that are free to counsel my students, and social workers. And even if I've been at tiny schools, most of my schools in the west side are under enrolled, 250 kids, and with the trauma that my students experience, there needs to be 500 counselors, 500 bilingual, bicultural counselors and social workers to help the students just navigate Chicago.
Yeah.
And I was at a meeting last night where they're saying there's over 500 CPS schools, but there's only 111 nurses for those five. Let alone if one of them wants to take a day off,
Right.
or sick or whatever. 130 librarians. So there aren't that one, at least, social worker, nurse, librarian per school. Now, Quentin, you are a music teacher.
Yes.
And you've been with CPS how long then?
17 years.
17 years. So you've
And
seen a
counting.
lot.
I
You've seen
have.
the cutbacks. Tell us
Yes.
about it, please.
Well, I started with CPS in 2002 when the district still had over 600,000 students. And I've watched our student enrollment decline. I've watched our buildings fall into utter disarray. I've watched the privatization of education. I've watched the expansion of charter schools that has decimated the local community schools, public schools. And it's not to bash charter teachers or anything of that nature, but the reality is we're doing things in the charter schools, in the public schools. We're working with the limited resources and trying to do the very best that we can. I've watched class sizes just continue to grow. I've watched services continue to disappear. And I've watched the violence in this city become increasingly worse. And I am watching the fallout from that, the fact that we don't have case managers, we don't have enough social workers, we don't have enough of those people in these buildings to deal with students that are dealing with trauma. Trauma is a real issue, and it's an issue that that we don't really think about. And when we get to a society where we have become desensitized to not just school shootings or mass shootings, it becomes a big debate then, in which, don't get me wrong, it should be. That's pretty bad. But it needs to be a debate when Jonathan's uncle got killed last night,
Right.
and there's no social worker there the next
Talk to
morning
him
to
the
see
next
about
morning.
him.
Yeah.
Or the home has no food, they're hungry, or the kids are living in a home with no heat, or it's getting cold now, they don't have coats and things of that nature. And as educators, we see those needs and we try to help to the best of our ability. But the reality is we need the funding and we need the supports put into all of our schools, not just certain schools, not just schools in neighborhoods where people are paying goo-gobs of property taxes and things of that nature, but it needs to be in schools in Inglewood, and schools in Roseland, and schools over in the Austin community where gun violence is an everyday thing. But we don't want to allow our students to be disenfranchised that way. We don't want to allow our students to become desensitized to violence and just assume that that's just a way of life and accept that they deserve better.
Okay, I want you to hold that thought because we're going to pick up on this thing. I think that's something that's totally missing in this whole debate about this contract. So we're going to come back to that in just a moment. But before we do, I wanted to get a few announcements up on your screen about some important upcoming activities around the city. First of all, this coming Sunday, March on Indigenous Peoples Weekend, you might say, Columbus Day, a.k.a. Sunday, October 13th at 1 p.m. at the intersection of Michigan Avenue and Ida B. Wells, formerly Congress Parkway. There is going to be a close the concentration camps. No one is illegal on stolen land. Literally dozens of community groups are coming together to say, stop the attacks on immigrants, stop the attacks on refugees. And so please come out to that this Sunday. And of course, we wouldn't be doing the right thing unless we were supporting our teachers and support staff in their prospective strike. So come out to the Chicago Temple on Monday on Indigenous Peoples Day, 2 p.m. That's right across the street from Daly Plaza. Please check that out. And one of the big reasons why we don't have the resources that we need for our schools and everything else, housing, etc., is the insane war funding. And the Democrats are as guilty of this, including our own Democratic Congressman Quigley and Schakowsky, amongst others, for funding the war machine. They both voted for record war funding this for 2020, and this is like become an annual event. So please come out to this demonstration on Wednesday at 1 p.m. at 3223 North Sheffield Avenue. So getting back to the issue of trauma, because this is something that is just not covered. One of the things that just burned me up watching the Rahm Emanuel years was, here's a guy who went to New Trier High School, where they had gold-plated everything. Music, art, after-school activities, libraries, social workers, college counselors, and so forth. Here you had people, kids who needed the least of these services, and you got the most. And when you're talking about CPS schools, we've seen the privatization of the school services in terms of the cleaning is now a disgrace because all that the cleaning service, all those folks, well, they went to the Sodexo or whatever, these privatized, juiced firms. So what does it look like in terms of the support staff, in terms of cleaning and so forth in your schools? Elane, give us an idea about that.
So right now, my current school, it's meticulous and spotless. My school before, a tiny school, it was filthy. And it was a north side school. I worked on another west side school. It was spotless, also because the principal micromanaged that. And why we have filthy schools that are impacting the health of our students and teachers and just the working environment. That's...
And Quentin, your views on that?
Yeah, school cleaning is a serious problem. My school is a newer building, 3 years old, and so we don't have some of those issues per se. We have a cleaning staff that it is privatized, but I think they do pretty decently to try to make sure that our workspace is done. But that's not the norm, unfortunately, in CPS anymore. I remember, when I started, CPS had board appointed janitorial services and custodial services and board appointed engineers, and a lot of that is disappearing. And I think the goal ultimately is to just privatize it all. And that the taxpayers pay for it anyway. And it's just not good. It's not good for our students. It's not good for our communities.
Well, I think it sent his message to the students that you're disrespected, and so you wonder why kids act out. It's not just the trauma that so many kids, But if they feel like they're being disrespected by society at large, why should they respect society?
Right.
And a filthy school says that. In terms of the trauma, you were talking about this before we went into the announcements, Quentin. Say a few more words about it.
Well, I mean, you see it every day on the news. I don't watch the news at night anymore, first of all, because I like to have a good night's rest. And I just don't need all that bad news before I go to sleep. So I don't watch it at night. In the mornings, some mornings when I'm getting up, getting dressed, I'll turn on Good Morning America or some type of news and listen to what's happening, or I'll read about what's happening. But the reality is, so many of our students are living in chaos. And not necessarily chaos in their immediate home, but chaos in the city around them. And then when you think about teachers as educators, we're required to live in the city of Chicago. And housing is becoming increasingly expensive. Everything, city services and all of that is increasingly going up. And we're expected to, deal with that.
Right.
But and imagine these kids whose parents may not have the resources, and they're in these crime-ridden neighborhoods where disinvestment has just run rampant, and you have abandoned whole blocks of abandoned homes. You go in certain schools, and literally across the street, most of the street is vacant or boarded up because homes have been allowed to fall into disrepair. And then it all trickles back down to the criminal activity. All that abandonment breeds violence.
Right. Well, some 16,000 people are 16,000 CPS students are homeless, according to the CPS. This isn't me making this. This is CPS.
Yeah.
And those students are suffering a different kind of trauma.
Yes.
I do believe we've got a caller. Paul, if we can get that caller in here now.
I have a quick comment to make about the mayor. I really do believe the mayor are really against jobs that push people into the middle income and upper middle income bracket, even though she came from that. When you're looking and seeing, especially what's going to be happening with the police department and the fire department, she want to cut their salaries. And when you look around certain other things that she have done as well, even though I voted for her, I sort of have what you call buyer regrets right now. And when you look at how some of these multi-millionaires are getting these tip funds, like they got that Lincoln Square project that's costing $1.3 billion. When they want to find money for certain things, they can have it. And when it comes to certain other things, especially when dealing with the children in Chicago Public School, when it gets to the point, quality of life, they can't find no money. And she don't want to be committed into a contract. Because when you look at a lot of other jobs that were middle income, even with CPS, those salaries have been cut or those jobs are being eliminated. I just going to wait and hear you your comments.
Okay, caller, you bring up a good point here, because one of the central things that the union has been saying during this contract fight has been put it in writing. That's the hashtag put it in writing. And I was just thinking about this the other day. On any number of fronts, not just with the CTU contract, but any number of other fronts, candidate Lightfoot said, I'm opposed to Lincoln Yards. And then she gets into office, and her attorneys in the city are fighting to preserve that rotten deal. You see this in terms of homeless advocates who are arguing for a high-value home sale subsidy to fund affordable housing. Well, now that's off the table to instead plug the budget deficit. Mental health clinics. She said she was going to open up the 6 closed public mental health clinics, and now she's got her surrogates running out around the talk show saying, oh no, this isn't the way to go. Community benefits agreement for the Obama Center, a neighborhood that's going under gentrification. Both President Obama as well said, oh no, well, let's not put this in writing. And again, it's not, don't put this in writing. Now, Mayor Lightfoot was a very accomplished attorney, arguably at the top of her field, maybe playing for the wrong side, but any attorney who says to you, oh, we don't need to put this in writing, is either a lousy attorney or is trying to put something over on you.
Right.
And our argument here is they're trying to put something over on the CTU and SEIU, and you guys, you weren't born yesterday. You've seen this with ROM. We don't need ROM 2.0, Mayor Lightfoot. So put these issues about a nurse in every school, a social worker in every school, a librarian in every school into the contract. And while you're at it, give SEIU a decent contract as well. I was at an event last night, and SEIU rep there was telling us some horrific things. So many of their workers are literally living in poverty.
Yeah.
Literally living in poverty. They qualify for school lunch programs. A huge percentage of them. The city's latest offer to these workers is, we will give you 1 week's vacation after 7 years of service. They have no vacation right now.
Right.
No.
They have no vacation right now.
Yes, let's increase the pay of our teacher assistants, our special ed. SICAs, because they are clerks, they run the school. Our bus aides, we need to increase their
nuts of money.
salary, and they help run the school just as much as we do.
Well, and Elane, you're a special ed teacher yourself. Tell us about some of the situations that you're facing trying to help your students.
Yeah, well, I had a fantastic, amazing teacher assistant. One of my other students was supposed to have a shared teacher assistant, and that teacher assistant was always pulled to sub or do other places. So I spoke up about IEP violations, not following the federal law, and to the principal and via email, and I was let go because of talking about violations while advocating for my student. So we have to find a lot of different ways to advocate and organize with our students, with our teacher and parent organizations, special ed parent organizations, just having new special ed teachers be aware of the law, and to make sure that they are following the law, and just continue to get professional development and have a reasonable caseload, and not to have spend hours and hours write IEPs and not get compensated.
And IEPs are
individual education plan. So that is the federal that legal document that is giving students services, and that the teachers and the school must follow. And sometimes there's made shortcuts because from administrators because of staffing, or it's too expensive. I also had a student who had severe trauma, and we had 3 years worth of data for him to be in a therapeutic school, and the principal didn't, and the case manager didn't want it, and we kept pushing and pushing. It's probably seen as too expensive, and also he was a ward of the state, so I had to keep advocating for him because not enough adults were advocating for him.
Right.
Yeah, and what this goes to is just how undemocratic the whole situation is. Chicago is the only public school system in the state that does not have an elected school board. And again, that was another one of candidate Lightfoot's promises, and there have been a couple of proposals for elected school board for the city of Chicago, and she said, oh, no, not good enough.
Yes, let's get an elected school board of people that can report to the voters and who could
Be responsible
be
to 'em.
accountable.
Yes.
And who are pro-teacher.
Yeah. Well, in bargaining, we've been trying to. That came up, and we talked about just things in general that are needed in our schools. And Mayor Lightfoot and her people might want to suggest that the union has taken we're not bargaining in good faith position and things of that nature, while yet her Board of Education and her bargainers, but her attorneys, they're not bargaining in good faith.
Right.
They brought us back a
Rahm and
proposal.
Daly holdovers.
Exactly.
The lead attorneys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you have these people coming in and they bring in what they're calling comprehensive things, and then having the unmitigated gall to say, oh, well, this is our best and final offer. Mm-hmm. And your best and final is what you came to the table with the first time, and you've not even attempted to negotiate on real needs. Mm-hmm. And what I think people need to remember is that we're the only school district in the state that cannot strike over things like class size.
Yes. And it was the Democrats and Republicans who Springfield who say, put our students first, the children are our future, and they passed that bill.
Yep.
They
and
did.
The CTU, to its credit, is sticking to its gun and said, no, we're not going to throw our students under the bus.
Yeah.
We're going to say this should be in the country. And the city, if it wanted to, could say, yes, we will have this. All it takes is Mayor Lightfoot living up to what candidate Lightfoot said,
Yes.
and putting it in the contract.
Yes,
Make
it's
it
called
enforceable.
accountability.
Exactly.
It's about being accountable. And just as being an educator, I have to be accountable to my students. I have to be accountable to my students' parents. These candidates that we put in office have to be accountable as well. And it's the least that they can do. And especially considering the amount of money that we're paying for all these city services, we should see the fruit of our labor and where our resources are going. And if you're not going to put them in the schools, that's just not appropriate.
Well, and of course, the other side's going to plead poverty, no pun intended, about the budget deficit. $837 million, if I'm remembering correctly. Well, that is about what the TIF surplus is right now. Declare a damn TIF holiday. Take that money that was put into those TIF funds in a totally unethical, probably illegal way, because these are supposed to be for disenfranchised communities where development would not happen but for Lincoln Yards. As our caller just said, $1.7 billion to that is an insult to the other people in the city who and you two as folks on the front lines trying to help our kids.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what else is an insult? When the board tells you that they'll consider offering $400,000 towards providing other clinicians and things of that nature. $400,000 for a school district with 500 schools in it. Who are you hiring? So basically you're saying you're going to hire 3 or 4 people for hundreds of thousands of kids. It doesn't make sense. And so at what point do we put our money where our mouth is? You say you want good schools. You want quality schools for your students. You want community schools that are a safe haven for our children and where they can get quality education. And we are the educators that are in these schools. And we're telling you what we need. And you're looking at us as if we're being unreasonable. We're not asking for... we're not asking for them to line our pockets. I mean, we want a fair, livable wage. Don't get me wrong.
But that isn't the main issue here.
Yeah, but when you got to start thinking about how big our class sizes are, those are safety hazards.
I was hearing the other night about kindergarten classes with over 40 kids in them.
Yeah.
Kindergarten. Can you imagine trying to just discipline 40
kids. And imagine if if any of those children didn't have preschool and they're in school for the first time, that brings a whole new set of issues in and of itself. So it's just be right and do fair. That's what my great grandmother used to say. Just do the right thing and be fair. And I'm an objective person. I can look at both sides of a scenario. And I get it. You're trying to save as much money as you can. We're trying to, I don't want to say spend as much money as we can, but we're trying to get as many of the services that we need for our babies.
For the kids.
Yes. This is about our students. Because, I mean, they're really all that we have. What's going to happen if we're not equipping these children? Who's going to take care of us when we get old? If we're no longer able to do what we're doing. It's time out for the games. It's time out for the attempted public shaming of educators,
Right.
trying to act like the educators are being greedy because we want our pensions, and then when we had a pension crisis, they tried to put that on us. That wasn't our fault.
You guys were making your contribution.
Yes, and they didn't make theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not our fault. You decided to take a 10-year holiday, and then you fell into financial crisis as a result,
And
and,
you guys
then
don't
you tried to take it out on us. That's not our fault.
And you guys don't get Social Security.
We don't get
Right.
Social Security.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our
this
pension is it.
That's it. That's it. And the other issue is that we're talking about talking money. What about all this money going to the police? Again, candidate Lightfoot said she was against the $95 million cop academy on the west side. Mayor Lightfoot says she wants to put even more into that, and is talking about turning some of the closed CPS schools
Yes.
into mini cop academies. So it's a question of priorities, and budgets, as well as contracts,
Yes.
are an indication of what your priorities
Yes.
are. And I understand from the CPS, the CTU research, that the CPS budget is not putting the kind of money into the special ed teachers, into the social workers and so forth, that they claim that they favor.
Right.
Our babies need those things. That's just the reality of it. Our children are suffering. Their parents are suffering, and our goal and our job is to give our kids hope, educate them, and let them know, despite all odds, you can still make it. You can be whatever it is you want to be, regardless of what your situation may be right now. And that's all we're asking for. Help us help our babies become the best possible citizens of this world that they could possibly be.
And I just want to call your attention to a great sign. Our working conditions are our students' learning conditions.
Absolutely.
That is what Elane and Quentin have been talking
Yep.
about here tonight. I'd like to give the hats off to the Chicago's Teachers Union, which is not only standing up for our students and themselves, but also is standing up for the labor movement. This is what the
Yes.
labor movement
Yes.
means, and this is how you can get in contact with the Chicago Teachers Union. Just a few quick announcements before we close things up. Again, there's the event on Sunday, the 13th, no one is illegal on stolen land. There's, of course, the Stand Up for Education Justice rally on Monday, 2 p.m. at the Chicago Temple across the street from the Daily Plaza. And, of course, the event for opposing the wars, which robs our schools and so all our other social services of so many things they need. So once again, I'd like to thank Elane Jacobs from the Prieto School, Prieto Elementary, and Quentin Washington from the Sidlowski Elementary School. And this is Andy Thayer saying good night for the Gay Liberation Network here on Chicago Access Network TV.